Hello, this is John Majori with Majori on Bowie, and this is the Majori on Bowie YouTube channel, where I have a new interview every week that always has something to do with David Bowie. And for daily content, visit the blog www.majorionbowie.com, where I have new content every single day that almost always has something to do with David Bowie. And as long as you're here, hit like and subscribe so you get notice whenever there's a new interview, which is at least once a week. Today, I'm going to have the coolest guest that I've ever had on this show, and it's going to be the coolest interview because the topic is going to be cool with the doctor of cool, Joel Dinerstein, a cultural historian and professor of English at Tulane University in New Orleans. Joel is the author of 3 books on the topic of cool, including the book that I'm using as a backdrop today, The Origin of Cool in Postwar America. He curated the first major exhibit of cool icons, American Cool, and is a noted lecturer on the topic. He's got a great TED Talk, which I'll link to in the show description here, and he teaches a class on the topic. And I have heard that David Bowie crops up during the class, so we'll ask Joel about that. So Joel, thank you very much for joining me today.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So before we get started, why are we wearing sunglasses?
All right. So first of all, if there are objects of cool, as I call them, right, that we associate with it, right? It's basically sunglasses, leather jackets, motorcycles, and depending cigarettes, but now people think that's very uncool, but in the old days, cigarettes, right? And so the main reason we're wearing them is because the way that shades come into cool is that black jazz musicians who basically coined the modern usage of cool, in the post-war era, they used to wear sunglasses on stage at night. And this was led by Lester Young, who basically disseminated the term to the country first through other jazz musicians. And so his reason for wearing them was basically, I think, so people would leave them alone, right? It gives a certain sense of mystery to anybody.
Yeah.
It keeps people at arm's length if you don't want to talk to them. So to some extent, Lester was kind of a shy guy who'd been hurt by racism, and he just wanted people to leave him alone. But it became this stylistic choice that all the jazz musicians used. And the second reason I'll say is that pretty much everybody looks cooler in sunglasses. It's just true. It's like there's even a reason for this, right? I mean, a theory about it. It's not mine, which is that the famous media critic Marshall McLuhan, he said that that sunglasses turn the face into a cool medium. So instead of looking sort of like eager and like, anxious and being a try-hard, instead
Yeah.
you look kind of relaxed and chill. And, that's pretty true. And
Yeah, it is true. But now I'm going to propose that we expose the truth that
ah,
at least I am not
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not as cool as I might
yeah.
seem. So I'm going to take the sunglasses off.
So I'll just add 2 things. One is that, if that old sort of maxim that the eyes are the windows to the soul, right?
Yeah.
If you put on shades, you close the window, right?
Yeah.
It's a
Right.
way of sort of saying no access.
Yeah.
I also, when I was first writing about Lester Young, because that's kind of the first chapter of the book, I did research by wearing shades at night. And I will tell you that you cannot see much. Like,
Right.
it's stylistic because it is not helpful.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's totally fascinating to walk around at night in dark places wearing shades.
Did you ever hurt yourself?
No,
Yeah.
although I learned sort of to drive with shades on at night.
Yeah.
And I had a girlfriend who hated this, who was terrified. I mean, I wouldn't do it with her, but okay, there were once or twice when I forgot my regular glasses. All I had on me were sunglasses. And I can see I don't have terrible eyesight, but in general, I would say it will be better as long as we're driving on a road or an interstate with lights if I wore my prescription sunglasses. And man, she would get very, she
Didn't she
really
ever see
felt.
the Blues Brothers?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
That's what people think you're doing when you wear it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They got it sort of from R&B musicians and Ray Charles and stuff like that. But yeah, they're the proof of issue of
Yeah.
they're the proof. I'm
The proof of concept.
proof of concept. There you go.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you. That was exactly what I was looking for.
So before we get too far, I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you. I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to ask you, but I'm not asking it yet. I'm going to ask you what is cool, right? But before I ask you that,
Right.
there's something that's interesting that you said that I wanted to relate to a lyric in a Bowie song.
Uh-huh. Sure.
You talked about the origin of the word and where the word cool came from,
Yeah.
and I was recently listening to a song off of the album Lodger,
Uh-huh.
which is called Red Money.
Hmm.
And it has a line that's barely discernible where Bowie references the term Reet Petite, which is actually the name of another song,
Yeah,
and
Jackie Wilson song.
Jackie Wilson song. And Jackie Wilson got the phrase from an older song from Louis Jordan from
Oh,
the
yeah, Louis Jordan. Yeah.
yeah, Louis. I pronounce it like the name of the actor, not the musician. So that's
Yeah.
my mistake. But the older song is called Reet, Petite, and Gone.
Oh, yeah.
And Reet and Gone in that context are now not you. The meaning of the words did not survive, but cool did, right? So Reet sort of means pretty,
Right.
and gone sort of means far out.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But cool survived. Why? Why did the word survive?
All right. So this is a great question. I usually expect this question later. But so I contend that cool survives because cool is actually a myth, meaning it's a very important sort of part of American mythos. I also think it's the most important cultural export that America has ever given the world. I mean, cultural, as a concept, right? I don't mean like, weapons or the space program. So the reason you asked the right question, right? All of these words, like, even the words that mean sort of cool, like, swell and peachy and, even things like the bomb that are more recent, right?
Yeah.
Why has cool survived? And so I think that cool is part of sort of the American mythos that we don't yet understand. Like I wrote my book to try and say, all right, usually we say, I know it when I see it, right? Or who would
Mm-hmm.
try and define it? And I went, well, let's try and define it, right? And so I did my best, and we'll talk about it. But basically, a myth, when you don't think about it in terms of something that's not true, right? Or you've just elevated into something, a myth is something that a culture doesn't know it knows. Like it's something you keep retelling because
Yeah.
you know it's important to you, but you can't analyze it, right? So all you have is sort of the story of it, or in this case, the word. So we need the word because it has truths about sort of American culture that we still don't quite understand.
Yeah.
So as long as we don't understand it and it has a mystery and we think it has value, and I like to call it the supreme complement of American culture, right? You want people to think you're cool. You just do, right?
Yeah.
I think there's just stuff buried in it, and the word will retain its value until we absolutely know what that is, and then we'll shift to something else.
Yeah. That's interesting. So that said, you have a definition.
Well, sort of I do and I don't.
Yeah.
I do, but I usually I'm more interested in who's cool than what's cool. So
Uh-huh.
I'm more interested in the things that make a person cool. And that
Yeah.
includes from the highest levels of icons like Bowie, right,
Yeah.
to your friend who you think, and he's kind of a cool guy, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what interests me because what is cool often gets into like, products and stuff like that. And I'm not really interested in that. So it's some combination, right? I'm going to do the icon thing second, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like what we used for the exhibit. I'll do that second. So
Yeah.
there's some combination of a person who's cool at any level, right? In which there's a person who has kind of an original style, who has a certain kind of charisma, and it can be all kinds of different, a certain kind of swagger, and it doesn't have to be like a braggadocio kind of swagger. It can just be like a certain self-confidence that you don't understand. Like, I don't know why that person's self-confident. They don't seem to have much going for them, but they are, right? And then, really the definition is that someone who doesn't give a fuck what anyone thinks about what they do about or who they are. Like, it's really that simple, and it can't, I don't have a shorter definition or one without fuck in it, right?
Yeah.
Or oh shit in it, right? But that's really what it is, right? And that's at any level, right? So the way to say that that's more academic, right, is that it's someone who is self-authorized, someone who does not do things for social approval and doesn't care about social approval.
Yeah.
That's really how you say it in a sort of more presentable academic way, right? But really, it's someone who doesn't give a shit what anyone thinks about what they do.
So there's a number of different directions I want to go, but one of the things that I didn't appreciate when I was approaching your book, this book,
Yeah.
until I read it, was that this is really looking at cool during a particular period of time, right? And so you identify a change in the nature of the concept from before World War II to after, and then again, the book ends, this period of cool ends with the assassination of Kennedy, which is right before the emergence of Bowie, in the 60s version of Bowie, which wasn't famous yet. But so you just gave a definition, but that's not a definition for all time? Or what are
Right.
the variations? Yeah.
Right. So cool is not transgenerational, right? So because cool is most important to young people, right?
Yeah.
And I will actually say between like 17 and 25. Like, I don't care what 14-year-olds think.
Yeah. They're wrong.
They're not right. They're not there yet, whatever they're doing,
Yeah.
right? No matter how cool they are, they're not there yet, right?
Yeah.
But it's really important for that age group. And every generation needs and wants something different because basically they have a new set of circumstances, whatever it is, right? So one of my actual definitions of cool, because I have several, because there's no like, what is that people who are cool, the public figures, the icons, are the ones who carve out new strategies for any given generation. Like Bowie's like that, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we'll get to how Bowie does that later. But to some extent, the reason why that first book ends in 1963 or 64 is that cool was not mainstream yet. Cool was basically jazz and subculture and, had certain other kinds of elements like being existential. And all that gets exploded by the Kennedy assassination and what becomes what we know as the 60s, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
60s is an entirely different vibe.
Right.
And so cool comes from people who are like more subdued and sort of like balancing, sort of like being sort of, reserved and occasionally sort of for effect being explosive. The Brandos and the Elvises and, and Miles Davis. But it goes into sort of like Bob Dylan and Muhammad Ali and, people and Bowie, people who are much more performative and shifting around and people are drawn to them. And really, Dylan and Muhammad Ali and Bowie would not have been cool in the 50s.
Yeah.
Not really what their audiences want. And the thing I also say in the book is that one generation's cool creates the possibilities for the next. So like Bowie worships Brando, like kind of everybody worships Brando, right? And Dylan worships Miles Davis and James Dean and Brando, right? And Muhammad Ali, who I don't know who he worshiped besides the boxers. Well, actually, Muhammad Ali takes a lot of his stuff from Little Richard.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to some extent, so on the one hand, it has to build on what went before. On the other hand, it really depends on what that generation needs.
Yeah.
And so since that can't be predicted, it's one of the reasons cool as a myth stays alive because you don't know what a generation's going to need, right?
I'll tell you something that it's not in the book, but the book made me think of was, and it's not American either, but how James Bond, Sean Connery's James Bond, was the definition of cool in the early 60s,
Right.
but then became kind of corny and hokey by the
Yeah.
late 60s.
Yeah.
Right? Or what is in the book is Elvis, right? So, there's a period when Elvis was not really thought of as cool. I think probably retrospectively he is, but the Elvis of the late 70s was not necessarily thought of it in the same way as the Elvis of the late 50s.
Absolutely. Right. No, no.
Yeah.
Elvis, so Elvis in a way is like the coolest. I mean, in terms of breaking, like, I like to think of like true cool icons as
Yeah.
people who have breached the fabric of the universe. Like you have never seen someone like this before.
Yeah. Yeah.
And although that's harder to do now, in the 50s, you could do that. And Elvis was that, at least for white audiences, because what Elvis was doing was a combination of things that included Black culture, right? But my favorite story about this is there's a story about, I think it was John Lennon's school, right? You know the story? And the headmaster, like at an assembly in the auditorium, said, I have to sort of like say something to people today because I'm very angry that students are defacing the furniture, right? It wasn't quite graffiti, but something like that. He goes, and one student in particular is clearly doing this. So would Elvis Presley please stand up?
I did not know that story. What I
So,
thought you were going to say
yeah.
is, because I heard you say it in your TED talk, is John Lennon said before Elvis there was nothing.
Well, but it's that is the same story, right?
Yeah.
And it's 5 words, but in the other, that's like all his classmates are basically carving Elvis Presley right to the desk. Right?
That is hilarious. I did not know that story. Well, Elvis was actually Bowie idolized Elvis, and
I did not know that.
there's a
It makes
story. So I'll tell you a story. So
yeah,
during the Ziggy period, but
right.
early in the Ziggy period, so before he was well known in the United States, he flew to the United States with some of his bandmates and companions to see an Elvis concert. And he was dazzled by the showmanship and the presentation and the confidence. And he later would tell the story and say that he was embarrassed because he was dressed as Ziggy and drawing attention to himself when he was there as a fan. But it was clear that he wasn't just enjoying the music, but he was taking notes on just the presentation. And he considered Elvis, John Lennon, and Frank Sinatra as three sort of role models as an entertainer.
Well, those are pretty great choices, right?
Yeah.
It's
But
like,
to your point, Bowie himself would not have been cool during the period of their rise.
oh, absolutely. He wouldn't have been allowed on stage.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
in certain iteration, in the Ziggy iteration, he wouldn't be allowed on stage, right?
So I was gonna ask you, but you sort of tipped your hand or tipped that I was gonna ask you was Bowie cool?
Oh, yeah, of
And
course.
yeah. So was every version of Bowie cool? Was like Ziggy, does Ziggy
So
Stardust conform
I'm
to that? Yeah.
probably not enough of an expert to answer that question.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I know the stages of Bowie, but I mean, Bowie was pretty much always cool once he emerged as an
Mm-hmm.
icon. So, and so I don't know all the stages, right? Definitely throughout the 70s, definitely in the early 80s. I know there's a fallow period. It's
Yeah.
not, he's not cool. He's just like, he's not public. There's no,
Right.
aren't selling a lot and all that. So I don't know that much about that period. I know he reemerges kind of as the Thin White Duke.
Yeah.
And that his Thin White Duke thing is a Sinatra thing, right?
Right.
So that is. So, but I don't know. I don't know. There's a fallow period in there, right?
Yeah. So skipping that, I mean, the two periods that you know for sure, like the Thin White Duke period. If I was to say Bowie and cool, you might think of the Thin White Duke, right?
I actually think of the much of the glam period
You
much.
do.
I
Okay.
do.
How is that? How could that word apply to a
Well,
flamboyant? Yeah.
right. So this gets us both to sort of the definition that I deferred from earlier, and to Bowie, right? So when we did American Cool, right? The only reason Bowie's not in American Cool is because he's not American, right? Like it's the only reason why John Lennon's not in there is because he's not American, right? So, but we had a rubric, right? So if people asked us, why did you choose these people, right?
Yeah.
And we didn't say, look, we're both historians. We're not picking people randomly, right?
Right.
So, and we tested them with focus groups. Like we would, we struck people down because stuff like that. Anyway, so you had to be like 3 out of 4 things. So one was when you showed up, you had to be a rebel. You had to be transgressive in the culture. Like people had to want to shut you down, right?
Yeah.
Elvis, Madonna, to some extent Bowie in his gender bending days for sure.
Sure. Yeah.
So that had to be true. You had to have an original vision in your art form. It doesn't matter what your art form is, right? Music, cinema, writing, sculpture, whatever it is, it's really new. Like it is new on an artistic, innovative level, right? You need that, right?
Yeah.
You have to have you have to have transformed your entire field forever, right? So like, what Bowie does in music, not to mention in fashion and style and sexuality and gender, nothing's the same once he
Yeah.
leaves the scene, right? So those are like the 3 sort of big ones. If you have those 3, then you qualify, right? And to some extent, you pretty much, and this is part of it, you have to kind of have an original style. Um, and that can mean sort of self-presentation and dress, but it can mean a lot of things. And Bowie has that going for him too, right? So,
Yeah.
what happens in the period, the glam period, is that Bowie pushes what is acceptable for men in terms of gender and sexuality and fashion and dress and colors and, all of that, like kind of
Right.
once, right? And and it's kind of mind-blowing, right? And not so the people who Bowie influences then and forever
Right.
are more than I think any other rock star of his period, from like men, gay women, non-binary people, everybody, because of those moves, is influenced by Bowie.
Yeah.
And does that all while being a really, really great rock and roller.
Yeah.
So even when he moves on with Brian Eno and does the Berlin trilogy, which is, amazingly artistic and innovative, right?
Right.
Well, pretty much a rock and roller
Sure.
and really good at it, right?
Yeah.
I remember the first time I heard David live. Is that the name of that live album?
Yes, it is.
Right? Like, and I knew Bowie and I liked him, but I thought this album rocks. Like,
Yeah.
that is a great double live rock album because he always had a great band, right? And and I just, he does all of that within the field of rock and roll and influences all kinds of other fields, art, fashion, style, boundaries, sexual, gender, Bowie's the whole package. So
Yeah.
what happens in my class is in the class, your final paper has to be, they have to make a case for someone as cool. And it has to be someone we did not discuss at length in class. It has to be someone who's alive. And I like it when it's somebody really young who I either don't know or don't know much about. But often enough, but now I used to say someone has to be alive, and I still do stick to that. So you can't really do Bowie anymore. But occasionally, somebody always wanted to do Bowie, and I would say, I'm sorry, because, he's not American, right? That's the only reason, of course, Bowie's cool. And I do talk about Bowie in one of my lectures when I get to the 80s. Like, so even though I think of Bowie as a 70s guy,
Yeah.
I talk about him when I do the 80s because I'm talking about like Madonna and Prince and gender bending, and Bowie's a big influence on Madonna. And
Sure.
that's when I get to it for like 5 or 10 minutes in a given lecture.
Yeah. I'm tempted to just ask you to lecture that 10 minutes, but I'm not going to ask that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not, I teach it next semester.
Yeah.
So if it was this semester, I could probably go right into it,
Yeah.
but I'm not really in that head right now. So
Don't worry. I've got enough other questions.
so far, I would say I'm not worried.
Okay. All right. This is a kind of an esoteric question, and I might ask it the wrong way, but see if you get what I'm driving at here. So you mentioned a couple times that Bowie doesn't make the book. He doesn't make the, some parts of how you present the concept because he's not an American.
Right.
And the esoteric question is he not an American because he's not an American citizen, Or is there something American about the definition of cool that you focus on that just doesn't apply to David Bowie?
No, that's not esoteric at all. So I was for a long time. I mean, I've been doing work on cool for like 25 years, a little
Yeah.
longer, probably 30. And for a while, I was just trying to make the point that this is an American concept. And not only the fact that it's actually originally an African American concept and how
Yeah.
it is in. And because people wouldn't take the concept seriously, I was like very serious about what I was trying to prove and show and illustrate. So to some, so I was just trying to say it's an American concept that comes out of an American experience. It comes out of a specific moment. In fact, and it's not actually, I won't go off on this too much, but I actually think that cool, which shows up in the late 30s and early 40s, is actually a convergence of kind of an African American and like an Anglo American, literally UK masculine
Hmm.
sensibility. I think it's actually a synthesis of both. And I say this in the book.
You do right out of the
Yeah, right at
gates.
the beginning,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so, but I was still sort of wanting to, I have a PhD in American studies and I sort of wanted to hold it to an American thing. So I
Yeah.
know that there were plenty of people not from the United States and in particularly from the UK who qualified, right? So I'll tell you a quick anecdote. When we were doing the American Cool exhibit for the National Portrait Gallery and the Smithsonian, they have, of course, a sister museum, the National Portrait Gallery in London. And
Yeah.
actually, theirs is much more important than ours. Like their National Portrait Gallery is like, the Met, and ours is part of the Smithsonian, but it's not as prestigious. But every year they would exchange their exhibits and see whether they wanted to, have them. And the UK was really interested in doing a cool exhibit for a little while. And I went, great, because it writes itself. Like I can think of those icons in like 3 seconds. And just the fact that I can, whether it's, Bowie or Keith Richards or John Lennon or Sean Connery, like, or Diane Ritter, whether the fact that I can just proves what the investment of the Anglo part is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they lost interest. I don't really remember why. I've always thought that was a shame. I would, if anybody's watching this, I still want to do it. And you guys should still do it. I don't really care whether I'm on board. I want someone to do a UK cool exhibit. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, in the same way, but this is a little different. I used to think that we should do like a New York cool exhibit because I'm a New York guy. You could do one. You could do an LA cool exhibit for sure. But like, I don't care about the LA cool exhibit. I'm from New York. I care about the New York cool exhibit. But the UK one, I agree with. And I was just trying to make a point about the origins of cool being out of a particular American experience at a particular historical moment. And so therefore I was, excluding the obvious kind of icons from England.
Yeah.
That's all.
So this gets a little afield, but related. So again, I'm talking about the book that's
Yeah.
behind me, The Origins of Cool and Postwar America. The opening, you mentioned the opening chapter, but
Right.
before that, you have a
Right.
preface that does not begin in the United States at all, nor does it begin in England. It begins in Paris.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Paris and New York are the two world post-war cultural capitals.
Yeah.
That's just true. And to be fair, I am starting with American jazz musicians in Paris. So,
Well,
yeah.
you start with Miles Davis, but also, who is he with?
Well, I was with Juliet Greco.
Yeah.
And I make the case, but
Yeah.
really, because post-war America, post-war to America has a certain kind of cachet as a cultural moment. And because the real intersections I do for the first half of the book are jazz, film noir, and existentialism, I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to hit as many notes as I could in that
Yeah.
opening.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if I'm going to hit existentialism, it's better for me to be in Paris. It's better for the book to be in Paris than elsewhere.
Yeah.
Here's the reason your challenge is really interesting, because I make a pretty serious case in chapter, I think, 4, that Albert Camus is absolutely cool and absolutely
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So I could have made a case for somebody in the UK, but I don't think that they were seminal figures in how it worked. The only thing I really discuss about the UK in the book And I do discuss how it, crosses over to the Beatles and Stones and stuff like that. But I make a case for the movie The Third Man, one of the all-time great film noir,
Right. Yeah.
is, to some extent, partly British, partly Austrian. It's a half British, half Austrian production. And so I do say certain things about Britain in that period because the British loved that character. I mean,
Harry Lime.
yeah, Harry
Yeah.
Lime.
Yeah.
Like, there's a radio show about him. Like, Harry Lime is the pre-birth of James Bond within English popular culture because Ian Fleming loved him, everybody loves him, and James Bond shows up like I think the first James Bond book is like 3 years later. Um, so that's the only part I can think of where I get the UK thing
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But otherwise, and that's Harry Lime and James Bond that you brought up. And but otherwise, it's that all the cool guys in England are growing up in a leveled working class, post World War II England, and they're all absorbing all of this plus American blues. So they're going to take over, with the British invasion and everything else, right? But in that period, they're not the major players. The major players of that kind of intellectual and artistic culture are really this kind of dialogue between the United States and France.
Hmm.
Because the French, they love Hemingway, they love film noir, they invent the term film noir, right? So that's much more of a dialogue that's happening between the US and France. Later, there's a dialogue between the US and the UK.
I will note, and I wanted to see if you agree with me that Miles Davis was still cool way after this period.
And no, Miles never really loses his. I mean, the only time Miles loses his cool as a figure is he drops out of playing for 5 years in the late 1970s, between 1975 and 1980. And he drops out for a lot of reasons, but among other things, he's doing too much drugs. He's kind of isolated himself in his house, and he's probably, not only doing too much drugs, but it's probably affecting him in a way that he's what I would call sort of paralyzed in the sense of being a public figure.
Yeah.
Dizzy Gillespie goes up to his house because, when Miles shows up, he worships Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker. They're older. In fact, the first sentence of his autobiography is the most fun I've ever had in my life, except for having sex, is the first time I saw Charlie Parker and Dizzy. That's the opening line. So in that sense, Dizzy Gillespie is probably the only person in the world who was alive at that time who would have any leverage and authority over Miles Davis. And he goes up to his house and he kind of reads him the riot act. And he says, he basically says, if you do not play and do not come back out and record and be a musician, God will take away your gift. You cannot do this. And like, it works. Miles comes back out. He makes records in the 80s that first people didn't think were very good and have been reevaluated as being pretty strong. But that's the period Miles just drops out of culture
Yeah.
for 5 years. So I would say he's not cool, sort of, but it's a pretty short period, and he's not doing anything uncool. He's just disappeared.
So just to hang on to Miles Davis just for a moment, I think um, Miles Davis is one of these figures whose the concept of Miles Davis has transcended the person.
Oh yeah,
So right, and I think the most iconic person like that you mentioned in the book as I forget how you put it, but I'm going to say the paramount icon of cool is James Dean, right? So people know the look today without even know who it is, right?
right.
So I mentioned this because I want to ask, in the 10 years since he passed, has Bowie elevated to that strata?
I don't think so, but I don't think I know.
Yeah.
Like, I think this is a question you would know better than me. I saw the Bowie, the exhibit, right? There was that
Yeah.
art exhibit. I saw it.
David Bowie is, yeah.
Yeah, it's great, right?
Yeah.
So that would be the beginning of the argument, right? Because I went to the Brooklyn Museum, it was mobbed. But you expect it to be mobbed.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think not most, but a lot of icons, sort of transcend their image, transcends their life.
Yeah.
I think Bowie, if he hasn't, has a good shot at it in every kind of way, but I don't know the answer to that. But I want to, just because you brought this up. So the two people everybody think is cool, if you're going to like bring up people, are Miles Davis and James Dean. It's not an accident they come out of the same period, even though they're very, very different.
Yeah.
But the funny thing about James Dean is I don't really think James Dean is that cool. And I mean, but everyone else does. And my job as a cultural historian, we said this when the exhibit was coming out, was like, we're working with who people think are cool. It's not up to me to be the
Yeah.
arbiter. I mean, yes, I have an outsized effect because we're the curators, but I'm not going to just pick people because I think they are, right?
Right.
And there are people I think who are, but weren't in the exhibit, and vice versa. It's like I tell people, because people would always ask me, so who's in the exhibit you don't want in the exhibit? I would always say Quentin Tarantino. I think he's an asshole. I don't think his films are great. Like, I mean, he's got it. He qualifies. That's why he's in it.
Yeah.
Innovative, is influential, he has an original style. He qualifies. But as a person, not so much. But James Dean, I did this. I had to go and watch. I read all the material and I did this is what I have to do. And I did a deep dive on his movies and documentaries and everything before I could really write the section on James Dean, because he never really worked for me. But
Well,
what you
yeah.
bring up, just one more thing, is that his look is now the look of any like up and coming, good looking white American kid who wants to be an actor.
Yeah.
That's just it. They don't have to know his name. Like, that's the look. That kind of brooding, kind of life sucks, but I'm getting through
Right.
without acknowledging how good looking I am. Like, that is what he gave us.
Yeah.
And so I agree with that. But really, Brando's a much better actor and much
Yeah.
more important.
And his movies are more interesting. I mean, I know Giant and I know Rebel Without a Cause, and I don't think of either of them as actually particularly good movies.
No, agreed. They're fascinating movies, and you can see why teenagers instantly were drawn to him.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean when I say every generation has needs. You cannot predict what they are. And then someone shows up who's going to be an icon of cool, and the generation gravitates to that person. And you go, oh, it's this guy.
Yeah.
And now let's
So,
figure out what's going on. By the way, I'm not sure that works anymore. Like, it used to work when we had, three TV stations and Hollywood movies.
oh,
But
that's
now we
fascinating.
have so
Yeah.
many different channels and so many niches that you could be in, that I do not know if it works that way anymore.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
that's another thread I'd like to pull, but I don't want to leave James Dean yet, and also relate this back
one
to
more thing.
Bowie and why I asked the question the way I
Yeah,
did.
yeah.
So, you said in response to my question that maybe you know better than me about Bowie, but I'll tell you why I'm asking you, because first of all, this is my hobby, and so my view is skewed.
Of course.
And
Yeah.
the other thing, I live in New York State. I don't live in New York City, but I go to New York City frequently, and you can't walk 3 blocks without seeing David Bowie's face somewhere. And
Really?
yeah, and that reminds me of you see James Dean, the image of James Dean, the image of Marilyn Monroe,
Right.
some reference to Elvis Presley, and maybe a handful of others. But we're talking about James Dean in particular. The image of James Dean, I think, has taken on a meaning that extends way beyond that handful of movies that he made, right?
Absolutely.
So the lightning bolt or phrases, I take pictures. There's a Blackstar bar, and it's like, is that a reference to Bowie? I think it is, right? The Stardust diner. I don't think that is, but it's like it's like that's a word that's associated with Bowie, and I think there are these concepts that this idea that I'm playing with in my exploration of this topic is I don't know that those images or concepts had the same resonance 15 years ago while Bowie was still alive as they do today. And so, like James Dean, has he sort of elevated to this kind of iconic level? But you're not in New York City, and this is not the central focus of your attention.
Yeah,
So,
and it's definitely not true in New Orleans. I mean, I love
yeah,
New Orleans, but it doesn't resonate. I mean, it sort of resonates with cool people. They all like Bowie, but I would
yeah,
not be able to walk around anywhere, including the French Quarter, and see references to Bowie a lot. But I will. You may given
Yeah.
me the challenge, and I will start looking, but I don't think so. By the way, the thing about James Dean, I'll come back to Bowie in a second, is one of the, one of the best moves you can make if you really want to be remembered as a cool icon is to die young. It's a
Yeah.
great choice, but it does work
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you have that kind of power and charisma when you are in your prime, right? So it's like that whole 27 club, right?
Right.
It's like those people will be cool forever
Yes.
because no one had to see you age or get old or become a reactionary, or any of those things, right?
Yeah.
But I think you might be right about Bowie. To some extent, and again, you would know better than me. I think Bowie lived a fairly quiet life his last 10 years or so, maybe more, right?
So yeah, in 2003, he had a health issue, and he went into like semi seclusion. He was walking around New York City, so he
Right.
wasn't in actual seclusion, but he stopped performing. He stopped recording for 10 years,
Right.
and there was a thought that he had retired. And there were these Bowie sightings in Manhattan, but he was lying low, and he was also raising a young daughter,
Right.
right? And then he made a surprise reemergence with an album in 2013 called The Next Day, which part of the release, there was no advance notice that he was going to release it. He just released it, and it was actually a big hit. It was critically well received, and then he unbeknownst to him, he had 3 years left to live, and in that time, he was behind a play called Lazarus that debuted in late in 2015, and
Remember
then the album Blackstar,
that.
which is largely perceived of, and I'm actually mentioning this because for a reason.
Right.
It's largely been interpreted as an artistic representation of his own death, right? So the reason I'm mentioning this is not to tell that long story, but Blackstar, Bowie went to you. You are, in addition to the doctor of cool, you're an expert on jazz, right? And a lot of the cool figures that you cite, and even the concept, as you already mentioned, comes out of the jazz world.
Right.
So for his final album, Bowie approached a jazz musician, Donnie McCaslin, and asked him to put a band together. And I've had him on my show.
Hey. Yeah,
And
no, I know this part of the story, but go ahead.
yeah, so it's is jazz cooler than any other form of music? Does this help seal the deal with Bowie's
So,
reputation?
yeah, only with guys our age. Because jazz is actually pretty uncool to my students. I mean, look, this hurts me to say, but it's true. Jazz is the least streamed genre of all musical forms,
Yeah,
right? So the people who know, I mean, not only who like it, and I include young people, there is a way in which I think jazz functions as the coolest art form. In part, there are a number of reasons for this that are not just image ideas. So, in part, it's because jazz musicians are like the best musicians. I'll argue that with anybody because they have to be. Like, they're on stage improvising the entire time they're on stage, right?
yeah,
So to have the chops, which is what jazz musicians call it, to do that, no matter, and be reacting to the three or four people around you, takes an amazingly deep level of musicianship as well as the ability to let go.
yeah,
Right? You can't be in control of anything while that's happening. You just, it's like being a great athlete. You have to trust both your intelligence and your artistic skill and your muscle memory and all of that, right? And your
yeah,
conscious, right? So I will always say I think they're the best musicians. But the other reason is that for me, not only is there a subgenre called cool jazz, right? And not only is there a cool aesthetic in jazz, and not just the 50s and Miles Davis, but Chet Baker and people like that. Like there's this really sort of laid back, chill sort of whole genre of jazz that never goes away. But it's really that for me, cool is actually kind of a deep, chill groove. You know, in every way you can interpret that as an aesthetic, as a way of being, as the guy in the corner who seems, not to care about anything, but is actually watching everybody. And jazz is where the deepest rhythmic grooves live on the planet. It's like if you cannot play every possible deep groove and sit in it and help create it, you can't be a jazz musician. It's like you
Yeah.
can't do it. And that's especially true of the rhythm players, the bassists, the drummers, the guitarists, the pianists, right? So I do think that if you don't dismiss jazz and you take an interest in it, that it is in fact the 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 coolest the coolest art form,
Yeah.
um, for all those reasons.
Yeah.
And I think that still is true.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
That that's I like every kind of music except opera. And I'm not, and I could probably like opera too if somebody like, if I was with somebody who loved it and showed me, but aesthetically, I don't really like those operatic voices. So, but,
I've
but
read somewhere I casually like opera, but I read somewhere that that is the least popular vocal style.
yeah, that doesn't
Yeah.
surprise me. It's like, I can't really get to it.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple of operas and it's like one of those things, jazz is like this. Like really, you will be much more impressed by jazz if you see it live.
Hmm.
Because you can actually see what's happening, what musicians are doing, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's a little bit true in opera.
Yeah.
Like the theatrical aspect of what's happening in opera, the couple of times I've gone, I've really enjoyed, but I still don't like, I don't mind the tenor voice or even the baritone of men, but the soprano voice in opera, I can't do. I
All
just,
right. I won't put on any
yeah,
Marie
yeah,
Callas
I
right now. So
appreciate it.
I
But that's my feeling about jazz. And it's why I sort of chose to, research it for all those years. It's like, oh, here's the deepest place of where the groove lives.
yeah,
And
this is fascinating. Yeah. So Joel, let me just ask you a couple closing questions. And the first one is just I think people have picked up what we're talking about when we're talking about the exhibit, the cool exhibit. Just briefly, what was it? But the longer question or is what criteria did you use to select the subjects that were in the exhibit?
right. So that was the rubric. I said this before, right? So when you show up, you're transgressive. You're a rebel, and
Yeah.
the, the culture doesn't wants to shut you down, right? It's like the Vatican banning Madonna. It's, Elvis being only shown from the waist up. It's like that kind of, the Beatles like being rejected, it's like it's that kind of thing. Like the culture
Yeah.
is afraid of you, whatever you're
Yeah.
doing, right? So it's not just that you're rebellious, you're transgressive. You are, the origin of the word transgressive is sin. You're sinning against cultural and social norms. So that pushback will happen. The second thing is that what you are doing is an original artistic vision that no one has ever seen anything like you before, right? So you're
Yeah.
just, there are plenty of like great musicians and great singers and great artists, and great, writers and great painters who are not cool, meaning they are masters of their skill and their craft, but that person was not cool. It's like Steven Spielberg is not cool. He's a guy who makes good movies.
Yes.
He's an
Yeah.
artistic, maybe he's an artistic genius, but he's not cool as a person,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so, you have to sort of make these comparisons, right? So then you have that in person, that this person has to simultaneously have a certain level of charisma in which people are drawn to him and sort of an internal compass, that kind of self-authorization in which that person seems very chill just to be able to sit there. It's like that sort of George Clooney sort of skill.
Yeah.
George Clooney is like totally a classic cool dude, right? He's not an icon. He didn't invent it, but he's very good at it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and and then there's the don't give a fuckness, right? But and that you had to transform your field. Like all of these, that's how we made our choices. And it turns out, by the way, and I didn't know this before the exhibit, that even cool icons, they basically have usually 10 to 15 years in which their meteor is, orbiting.
Yeah.
And then whatever happens is whatever. But I even mean in the artistic way that we don't like the zeitgeist, right? These artistic guys hit the zeitgeist. And if you hit it for 5 years, you didn't make our exhibit. But if you hit it for like 12 or 15, then you did.
Yeah.
Um, because the generation that grows up with you and chooses you as a cool icon, they're always going to choose you. So like nobody young thinks Madonna is cool, right?
Right. Yeah.
But Madonna has sold more records than any other female recording artist ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Madonna was a truly transgressive artist in the 80s. And I thought, that she was, I didn't think so at first because I wasn't studying this either. And I was a rock and roll guy, right?
Yeah.
But the more, once I saw her videos and once I saw that first documentary she made, I went, oh, she's an artist. She
Yeah.
writes like an artist. I just didn't know.
Yeah.
But so that's what you're looking for in your icons. That's what you're looking for.
There's something that I don't think we mentioned about the exhibit that there were, correct me if I'm wrong, 100 images or 100 subjects, right? So it wasn't that you chose everybody who fit the definition that you just laid out. How did you come to 100? How did you cut people off? Was it difficult to get to 100?
So 100 is a good number. That's
Yeah.
why you choose it. It's like it's not more complicated than that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
100 icons, 100 photographs, right? It's like it's a big enough number to say this is worth coming to. It's a major concept. It's not so big that you're exhausted at the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
100 would have been, for example, right?
Yeah.
So there was a lot of, messing around. In fact, we have an alt list. We have the alt 100 list of the people who didn't make it, but we thought about a lot and might have actually been on the A list and got dropped, right? And I would tell my co-curator, Frank Goodyear, who's a friend, I would say, sometimes I prefer the B list. It's like if we're doing a pickup game, sometimes I really like the B list. But
Well, I think this is about the time that we should say that I was number 101.
I think this is the time we should say that.
Yeah, okay, but no.
Sorry, you didn't make it, but you're there on the alt 100 list.
Right.
And we really did call it the alt 100 list. So that was a lot of fun. But for the most part, we needed some balance. We wanted, we wanted athletes and we wanted writers. We wanted a balance of sort of professions. We wanted a balance of artistic areas. We wanted a balance of the 20th century, starting around 1920, about 100 years ago. So those were all factors involved. And we had there are people I regret, sort of taking off the list. There are people I regret not being on the list. So, for example, I'm not quite sure, just in terms of my female students over the years.
Yeah.
I really wish we'd put Stevie Nicks in there. She's on the B list, but not on the A list.
Yeah.
And I don't quite know how I missed it because I asked everybody all the time and somehow I missed it. In the same way that I know why this happened, but I don't think it should have held. So George Carlin was on the list for a long time, and George Carlin totally belongs on the list, right?
Yeah.
But we needed to find a photo of you in which you looked cool. And every photo we saw, he looks like a goofball. Like George Carlin is always making this face.
Yeah.
Photos. So we couldn't find a photo. And sometimes it was tough to choose. And I said, well, we're cutting them. But I really regret that because I think George Carlin was really the most important comic since stand-up comedy has been stand-up comedy. I think he's actually the most important. Except Lenny Bruce broke all the ground, but George Carlin was around the longest.
Not to get sidetracked on this topic, but I think early George Carlin holds up, and Lenny Bruce is more historically interesting than actually funny today.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
And everything Carlin says about why America sucks in the 90s and why we're in a downward spiral is all still completely true.
Yeah.
So, Richard Pryor's in it, and Lenny Bruce is in it. And so we both said, well, we have these two big, important comedians, but I really regret cutting George Carlin.
Yeah.
So, that was that, but that's just a sidetrack. Basically I'm hoping that, that I'm alive when somebody wants to do a 20th anniversary one. Because I would love to do it if Cool holds, and I used to think cool as a term, to go back to the opening,
Yes. Yeah.
was going to die out because in general, my students don't really use the term as in the same ways that other generations have, but it's still important to them. So the last couple of weeks of my course is under the heading "Is Cool Dead?" And we read certain things and I make certain arguments and I make it an essay on the final, and they always say no. They always say no in a way that says we don't want it to be dead.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I do think it will survive for the near future anyway.
Well, Joel, I feel like I could talk to you for hours, and there's like 17 different
Yeah, yeah,
directions that we could go in. But
yeah.
I'm not going to take up any more of your time tonight. Although, if you're up for it, I'll have you back.
No,
If you're
no,
up
sure.
for it, that would be
Yeah, no, no.
great. Let me ask you this,
Spend
because
some
I
time.
think anybody who's watching this is has to be completely enthralled by what you're talking about. And we mentioned this book, and we mentioned the exhibit, which is not up anymore.
Right,
But
right.
where could people find more of either your writing or your work in general?
So, I don't make this as I will tell you that the catalog for American Cool, which I co-wrote, is still actually the place to start. And it's out of print, but generally you could still get one on Amazon for like $70. And they were originally sold for 50. It's a beautiful book. I mean, the company did a great job. The photos are great.
Yeah.
I mean, there's someone on Amazon who says actually the book is better than the exhibit. So I would say it's worth the money to get. I have
Yeah.
written a lot of articles on Cool in a lot of different places. Um, I don't, so there's no easy place. I mean, the third book I wrote, which was a corporate project for Coach, is not something that, it's just a corporate project. But I'm trying to think of like what I've written recently that updates this. So I haven't, but I have to publish this. So last year I got invited to the UK for this cool symposium. And I did I hadn't done a brand new thing for a while because I've been thinking about where it is now, right? And I did a 20th century cool versus a 21st century cool PowerPoint, lecture for 45 minutes. And I'm pretty happy with it, but I haven't written it up or published it anywhere. So, I can't, I would love to say, go look at that. And to some extent, this is inspiring me. It's like, I gotta write something new about this. Um,
Well, coming soon.
yeah, I'll make one more point about it. The other thing I'm considering, which is which I want to do but won't happen immediately, is I'm thinking of writing a short book with a lot of pictures called Cool Jews. And partly it's because I had seen a Twitter thread about this guy who said he was thinking about it and he named three people and one of them was Ben Stiller. I said, "You're disqualified immediately." But that thread had like 1,000 responses. So then I posted to Facebook that, my response to him, and I got like 1,000 responses. So there's definitely a market for it. And it's sort of counterintuitive. And so, but I would still be a way in which I could update where I am on Cool at the moment and then
Yeah.
just focus it in this kind of way. So that's the thing that might happen. Um, Otherwise, the only other book I've thought of which would be good, and now that I'm saying this, I'm going, I should start working on these. There's a book of lists that I want to write called Cool in Five. And it would be like, for like several decades, the five movies, the five albums, the five artists, the five important words that stuck with us, right? And it would just be like an introduction and then like one of those old books of lists that we used to read in the 70s and 80s. And only because one of my good friends said, "Oh yeah, that's a book to do. You should do that book." So those are the things I might do.
Oh,
Um,
that's great. We'll keep an eye out for any of them.
Yeah, but otherwise, read this book, get a copy of the American Cool catalog, because my basic things, some of the things we've said here are in the two essays I wrote. And the pictures are great. It's like
Yeah.
it's really, it was something I'm proud of, and you know, People tell me that, so I'm happy they do. And I don't make any money on it, but I want to get the concept out there and an understanding of this myth out there.
All I can say is that's cool.
Excellent.
So let me,
Might as well end there.
well, I ask one final question of everybody, but
Shoot.
it's a silly question, but what is your favorite Bowie song and album?
Oh man.
Coming back to David Bowie.
Oh no, of course. What is my favorite? No.
You're allowed to say it's going to be different tomorrow.
Well, it might be. I do want to say, by the way, that Blackstar is a great record.
Yeah.
And totally and completely original take. And Ted Gioia, who is my favorite music and cultural critic, that was his #1 album that year. And I went, wow, that's impressive. That guy knows better than I do.
I think it's one of his great albums and one of the other great albums. And what I'm slightly surprised by is it is often ranked as his greatest album or near the top, which I would have guessed, and some lists have Ziggy Stardust as #1 or something, or low, but Blackstar is right up there. And it's the only of his late stage albums that is held in that level of esteem.
All right, so here's my problem. Because there's pretty much a tie.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to make sure I pick the right one, because I know of these three, they all go together in my head. And so so the three that I love, I mean, I love a lot of Bowie records, but in a rock and roll sense, particularly in a bar when I hear them come on,
Yeah.
it's really, and much as I love Golden Years, which is, I love that song, but in a rock and roll way, I love Suffragette City, Rebel Rebel, and Jean Genie.
Yeah.
And in some sense, they're in my head in the same place.
Yeah, sure.
And so I think the one I want is Rebel Rebel.
Yeah.
Which would fit our discussion.
It would. Yes, it would.
So we should go with that as a thematic closing.
Okay. That's great. Joel Dinerstein, this has been wonderful. It's again, if you have read the book, I'm going to try to find. I don't have the book of the exhibit, so I'm going to go out and get it. So, and
our mutual friend Dave has a copy somewhere, but you should go get one.
I will go get it. Yes, and I'm going to tell you this, and I'm telling you this last because you would storm out. I will bastardize the concept and come up with a mini cool exhibit for my blog. I don't know what it's going to be, but I'll find some pictures. And
yeah, sure. That'd be great.
Yeah,
no, let's do this again. This was fun. You're a good interviewer. I enjoyed this.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
We'll do it again.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Have a good night.
Okay, you too.